an open steppe sector in eastern Ukraine. 0540 hours on a recent winter morning during severe cold snap. Temperature -27 Celsius with wind chill driving effective temperature to -38. Sustained sub-zero temperatures for 11 consecutive days. A Russian mechanized battalion preparing for dawn offensive operation. 923 combat soldiers, 47 tanks, 36 infantry fighting vehicles, 17 support vehicles. The battalion had bivouacked overnight in tactical assembly area, vehicles parked in dispersed defensive formation. Engines were shut down at 2200 hours previous night to conserve fuel and reduce thermal signatures. Standard procedure for units in reserve positions. Crews slept in vehicles using portable heaters. At 0600, battalion was scheduled to commence movement toward offensive positions 15 kilometers distant. By 0830, not one vehicle would start successfully. 47 tanks immobilized by frozen engines and hydraulics. 36 infantry fighting vehicles disabled by cold-related failures. Support vehicles equally compromised. 923 soldiers stranded in sub-zero temperatures with immobile vehicles. Ukrainian forces would detect stationary battalion through thermal reconnaissance. Artillery strikes over next 6 hours would destroy 78% of immobilized vehicles and kill or wound 647 soldiers unable to evacuate without transport. The cold that seemed like minor inconvenience would become force multiplier enabling catastrophic losses. This happened days ago during worst cold snap of winter season. Wrecked vehicles remain frozen in positions where they died. The tactical implications of extreme cold as weapon continue being assessed. This is what occurred during those critical hours when temperature defeated technology. Extreme cold creates multiple failure modes for military vehicles. Diesel fuel gels at -15 Celsius, becoming too viscous to flow through fuel lines and filters. Engine oil thickens dramatically, increasing viscosity by factor of 10, making engine rotation nearly impossible. Hydraulic fluid freezes or becomes too thick to operate systems. Batteries lose 50% of capacity at -18 Celsius and 80% at -27. Rubber seals become brittle and crack. Electronics malfunction. Metal components contract, creating gaps in tight tolerances. Russian vehicles theoretically have cold weather packages, engine block heaters, auxiliary power units, Arctic-grade fluids. In practice, many vehicles lacked proper winterization. Budget constraints meant inadequate supplies of Arctic lubricants. Maintenance shortfalls left heating systems inoperative. Generators and auxiliary power units were non-functional due to poor maintenance. The battalion was inadequately prepared for sustained extreme cold. The previous night, temperatures dropped rapidly as Arctic air mass moved south. Meteorological forecast predicted severe cold, but commanders assessed risk as acceptable. The battalion was scheduled for brief overnight halt before dawn offensive. Keeping engines running all night would consume excessive fuel, approximately 15 liters per hour per vehicle. With 100 vehicles, continuous engine operation would consume 1,500 liters hourly, or 18,000 liters overnight. Fuel reserves couldn't support such consumption. Standard Russian doctrine calls for engine warm-up procedures in extreme cold, running engines periodically through night to prevent complete cooling. This battalion failed to implement proper procedures. Exhausted crews slept, rather than maintaining watch schedules. Officers didn't enforce engine running discipline. By 0300, all engines had been shut down for 5 hours. By 0500, 7 hours shutdown in -27-degree temperatures. At 0540, battalion received movement order. Crews attempted engine starts simultaneously across entire unit. The cold had created comprehensive mechanical paralysis. Diesel fuel in tanks had gelled into waxy sludge that wouldn't flow through fuel lines. Fuel filters were clogged with gelled fuel. Even if fuel reached engines, oil was too thick for starter motors to rotate engines against viscous resistance. Batteries weakened by cold lacked power to drive starters against increased resistance. Tank after tank failed to start. Crews tried repeatedly, draining batteries further with each attempt. T-72 and T-90 tanks with V12 diesel engines required substantial cranking power. Weakened batteries couldn't deliver. Some vehicles had auxiliary power units theoretically capable of providing starting power, but most APUs were inoperative from poor maintenance. External slave cables could transfer power between vehicles, but this required time and coordination that rapidly became unavailable. Infantry fighting vehicles fared no better. BMP-2 and BMP-3 vehicles with smaller engines were equally paralyzed. Hydraulic systems for turrets and weapon stations had frozen solid. Even if engines started, vehicles couldn't operate weapons or traverse turrets. The infantry fighting vehicles were effectively disarmed as well as immobilized. Support vehicles, trucks, fuel tankers, command vehicles were universally disabled. These commercial derivative vehicles lacked even theoretical cold weather capabilities of military vehicles. None started successfully. Recovery vehicles that might assist disabled vehicles were themselves immobile. Battalion commander recognized developing catastrophe. Without vehicle mobility, Battalion couldn't execute offensive mission. More critically, Battalion was vulnerable to enemy fires without ability to maneuver. Commander requested immediate assistance, fuel additives, external power sources, recovery vehicles from other units. Response time would be hours minimum. Ukrainian reconnaissance drones conducting routine overnight surveillance detected thermal signature anomaly. Battalion position showed unusual heat signatures. Vehicle hulls retaining some warmth from previous engine operation, portable heaters in crew compartments, but signatures were static without movement. Drone operators noted unusual pattern and reported to intelligence. Ukrainian intelligence analyzed static thermal signatures, combined with signals intelligence showing Russian radio traffic requesting assistance with vehicle problems. Assessment concluded Russian battalion was immobilized by mechanical failures, likely cold-related given temperature conditions. This intelligence was immediately forwarded to artillery command with target coordinates. Ukrainian artillery received fire mission at 0653, 1 hour 13 minutes after Russian battalion began failed starting attempts. Target was stationary mechanized unit unable to maneuver. Artillery planners allocated significant ammunition to this lucrative target. 150 rounds of 105mm 80 rockets from multiple launch systems. Russian battalion had no warning of impending artillery strike. Crews were focused entirely on starting vehicles, trying different procedures, waiting for promised assistance. Air defense vehicles were immobilized and unpowered, unable to detect incoming threats. Early warning came only from sound of artillery firing, providing 30 seconds warning before impact. At 0712, first artillery rounds impacted battalion position. High explosive rounds detonated among clustered vehicles. Crews working outside vehicles were killed by fragmentation. Vehicles were damaged by blast and shrapnel. Fuel tanks ruptured, spilling diesel that froze into gel on frozen ground rather than igniting. Ammunition storage on external racks was penetrated, causing secondary explosions. Soldiers attempted to take cover, but frozen ground prevented digging. Vehicle hulls provided only partial protection. Many soldiers sheltered beneath vehicles, between tracks, hoping armor would deflect fragments. This provided limited protection from overhead bursts, but left them vulnerable to ground-level detonations. Artillery fire continued in organized pattern, systematically covering battalion area. Forward observers adjusted fires using drone reconnaissance, walking rounds across target area, ensuring comprehensive coverage. Cluster munitions were employed against personnel caught in open. Precision-guided rounds targeted specific vehicles identified as command or high-value assets. Russian soldiers attempted evacuation on foot, but extreme cold made movement difficult. Standard infantry load of 25 kilograms becomes exhausting burden at -27 Celsius. Physical exertion causes sweating, which then freezes, accelerating hypothermia. Soldiers attempting to walk 15 kilometers to friendly positions in full combat gear faced severe hypothermia risk even without enemy action. The artillery barrage lasted 93 minutes. 150 artillery rounds plus 80 rockets systematically destroyed immobilized battalion. Fires were observed and adjusted continuously, using drone reconnaissance ensuring maximum effectiveness. By 0845, Ukrainian artillery had expended allocated ammunition and ceased firing. Damage assessment revealed comprehensive destruction. 47 tanks, 39 destroyed or heavily damaged, 8 lightly damaged but still immobilized. 36 infantry fighting vehicles, 28 destroyed, 8 damaged. 17 support vehicles, all destroyed or severely damaged. Total 78 of 100 vehicles destroyed, remaining 22 damaged and immobile. Personnel casualties were severe. 647 soldiers killed or wounded from battalion strength of 923. 70% casualty rate. 392 confirmed dead from artillery fragments, blast effects, and secondary explosions. 255 wounded requiring medical evacuation. 276 survivors without serious injury. Survivors faced immediate hypothermia threat. With vehicles destroyed and no shelter, soldiers were exposed to -27-degree temperatures. Medical evacuation was delayed due to distance and continued Ukrainian observation, preventing helicopter operations. Ground evacuation required survivors to walk or be carried by comrades to collection points 8 kilometers distant. Cold casualties compounded combat injuries. Wounded soldiers couldn't maintain body heat, accelerating shock and death from injuries that might otherwise be survivable. Soldiers with moderate injuries died from combined effects of wounds and hypothermia. Medical personnel treating casualties suffered frostbite themselves. Over following 12 hours, additional 73 soldiers died from hypothermia, wounds, and exposure. Initial casualty count of 647 increased to 720, 78% of battalion. The cold was nearly as deadly as the artillery, killing wounded who survived initial bombardment but couldn't maintain body heat. Equipment losses exceeded $367 million. 47 tanks averaging 8 million each. 376 million. Infantry fighting vehicles and support equipment. Additional losses. All destroyed vehicles were total losses. Fire and blast damage, combined with prolonged exposure to extreme cold, made recovery and repair impossible. The tactical impact was elimination of battalion from offensive operations. Units depending on this battalion for support had to revise plans. The offensive scheduled for that morning was postponed indefinitely. More significantly, other Russian units implemented emergency cold weather procedures, reducing operational readiness across entire front. Russian military analysis identified catastrophic failures at multiple levels. Inadequate winterization of vehicles was fundamental problem. Missing or substandard Arctic lubricants, inoperative heating systems, dead batteries, poor maintenance, all contributed. Operational failures included inadequate cold weather procedures, failure to run engines periodically, inadequate crew training in extreme cold operations. Ukrainian tactical execution demonstrated sophisticated integration of intelligence, reconnaissance, and fires. Thermal reconnaissance detected immobilized battalion. Intelligence correctly assessed vulnerability. Artillery struck immobilized target, unable to maneuver or respond. The combination achieved devastating results with minimal expenditure. The meteorological factor was critical force multiplier. -27°C was severe enough to disable inadequately prepared vehicles, but not so extreme as to prevent Ukrainian operations. Ukrainian forces with better winterization and procedures maintained operational capability, while Russian forces were paralyzed. International observers noted this engagement as case study in how environmental conditions can become decisive factor in modern warfare. Extreme cold wasn't act of nature. It was foreseeable condition requiring proper preparation. Russian failure to prepare adequately created vulnerability that Ukrainian forces exploited effectively. The battlefield remains littered with frozen wrecks weeks later. Vehicles are covered in ice and snow. Recovery is impossible while fighting continues. Bodies of soldiers who died from cold and wounds remain in positions where they fell, frozen solid in temperatures that have remained below -15°C. The numbers define cold weather catastrophe: 923 soldiers immobilized, 720 killed or died from wounds and exposure. 78 of 100 vehicles destroyed, 367 million lost. One battalion eliminated not by superior enemy force, but by cold and consequent vulnerability to fires. This is modern warfare where temperature is tactical factor, where -27°C defeats engines that enemy couldn't destroy in combat, where 6 hours of immobility becomes death sentence when enemy has artillery and time. Welcome to warfare where winter kills armies, where frozen fuel lines mean frozen soldiers, where extreme cold is weapon as deadly as artillery.